Patriots fans, J.C. Jackson does not get the franchise tag as expected, so the Patriots will be allocating that saved money into free agents and draft picks. But how will the Patriots be allocating that? Are they looking at the wide receiver position? And what were they doing scouting tight endage at the Combine? We'll answer those questions and more today with my illustrious guest, ClazzyClare Cooper of Pat's Propaganda and a Clare Perspective, the podcast. I'm Mike Debate, and you are about to be locked in to the Locked On Patriots podcast.
You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all of you Foxborough faithful, and thank you for joining me here today on the pod. My name is Mike Debate. I am your host of the Locked On Patriots podcast, which, of course, is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And, folks, thank you very much for making Locked On Patriots your first listen every day. As you can see, it is Wednesday, and that means a visit from Our Lady of Locked On, the Empress of Tight Endage herself, the Countess of Claz, the Baroness of Blockers, the Queen of TE, the Principal of Positivity, columnist extraordinaire for patspropaganda.com and Full Press Coverage Patriots, where she hosts her very own podcast, A Clare Perspective, the podcast. Folks, Claire continues to deliver an amazing listen. Check out this week's show with NFL Network's Mike Giardi. Claire, again, just a phenomenal listen. Smash the subscribe button, especially right after you listen to this episode or view this episode on YouTube of Locked On Patriots. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. As well, a co-host of One Patriots Place, I welcome in the Countess of Claz herself. Claire, thank you so much for joining me from across the pond today. Welcome to Locked On Patriots on a Wednesday, your designated day, Ms. Lady of Locked On.
This is it. Thank you for having me. But as you said, it's Wednesday, so where else would I be?
I'm sure you can think of a lot of other places you'd rather be right now. But in all actuality,
this is where I want to be. This is good fun. It's good fun.
You're too kind. You're too kind. You're too kind. Thank you so much, Claire, for joining me today. Again, Wednesdays are a day that we like to add a little class to the show, and you do that better than anybody. After all, her middle name, folks, is Claz. So, I mean, you have to really, I'm just kidding, folks. That's not the case. But, Claire, there's so much to talk about in the land of the New England Patriots. Obviously, the big news coming yesterday, which really wasn't a surprise to anyone, J.C. Jackson will not be franchise tagged. And I don't think there was anybody that was really shocked by this. Maybe some that were a little disheartened, maybe a couple that were surprised that they didn't work something out at the 11th hour. But ultimately, $17.3 million even for 1 year is a lot to allocate to just one player. And the Patriots now are probably going to look to use that money better elsewhere, not just to address the cornerback position, but likely to address other positions as well. And we've talked about a lot of them here on Locked On Patriots over the course of the last couple of weeks, whether it be the linebackers, whether it be the outside in terms of, finding someone on the edges of the offensive line, whether it be a third down running back. But one of the positions that a lot of fans want to see addressed, and quite frankly, I think the Patriots want to see this one addressed too, is the wide receiver position. And over the weekend, the Patriots were linked to a couple of high-profile one soon-to-be free agent. The other most likely would have to be pried by a trade, whether it be Amari Cooper or whether it be Robbie Anderson. Of course, Anderson right now is under contract with the Panthers. Patriots would have to pull a trigger on a trade for that. Reportedly, these two sides had discussions at the Combine last week. Also, the news coming out last week about the Dallas Cowboys' willingness to cut ties with Amari Cooper, and he may end up being out there as a free agent sooner rather than later, maybe even before next Wednesday's beginning of the league year. Claire, I know you are the Empress of tight endage, but you are so much more than that in terms of the analysis that you provide, and pass catchers are really becoming your specialty, not just at the tight end position, but at the wideout position, at the fullback position. You're a wealth of knowledge. And because it's Wednesday, we're going to pull upon that Wednesday wealth of knowledge. Yeah, I see you rolling your eyes. I see it. I do. You know my alliteration. You know I love this. I live
It's
for
usually
this.
Wednesday wisdom, in all fairness. So the wealth of knowledge is a new one. I don't know if there's a wide receiver wealth of knowledge on my Wednesday, in all fairness. I had to kind of do a bit of research on this one. But, we're going to give it a go. It's all
Kidding
in good
aside.
fun.
No, it isn't. And you know what? We wouldn't be pulling on that wealth unless I knew it was there. And trust me, our listeners know it's there as well. Have confidence in yourself. So anyway, getting back to what I was saying about the wide receivers, specifically Cooper and Anderson have been in the news a lot lately. But I think New England is serious about adding some talent at wide receiver. When you look at the landscape of the way the New England Patriots do business, Claire, do you believe that there is, I don't want to say any truth to the rumors because it's very difficult to gauge that right now, but where do you think the Patriots are better off focusing their attention? Is there something that you see in Anderson or in Cooper that you like for this team, or are they better off going in a different direction, maybe targeting the slot position as opposed to that outside perimeter wideout that the fans seem to want so badly?
Well, that's the thing that you touch upon is I know that many fans want that wide receiver one, and that's what is kind of being called for. And that usually trends towards a veteran guy who has a good record. So you can sort of see that he's a wide receiver one because he's put the numbers down. But it doesn't necessarily appear that the Patriots would be spending top money on a wide receiver in free agency. You can never say never. I mean, last year the Patriots stunned us all and they took two of the top tight ends that were available. So, I mean, I think that's why it's so kind of turbulent to say whether or not they're going to get a wideout. I mean, some of the less successful choices of last free agency are still counting against the cap. So it would take some work to move around because you've still got the likes of Nelson Aguilar. So, to plug in another highly paid guy is going to take some kind of work, some shuffling. I would imagine. I'm only sort of from a guesstimate perspective. One of the other issues is you need to kind of think about the future as well. You've got, or you want players that are going to be around for a few years within the system, working alongside Mac Jones. I mean, not just a quick 1 year hit, plug and play guy, move on afterwards sort of thing. Hopefully the Patriots are trying to rebuild something or build something within and build it around Mac Jones, because as far as we can all see, as far as we can all tell, Mac Jones is the quarterback for the future, and that's what the Patriots are building around at the moment, and to be expected sort of thing, number one draft pick. So I mean, there's a rather decent depth at wide receiver in the draft. Now, I know we're not really going to talk about the draft because it's still kind of free agency sort of time. But there's a lot of depth at multiple positions in the draft at the moment. I mean, that's great, but it's also frustrating because there's so many guys that, you look at and think, oh, you want the Patriots to draft, but there's only so many picks to go around sort of thing. So maybe kind of on my sort of perspective of it is, maybe the draft would be the best route, because ultimately that's possibly the cheapest route to go down in regards to getting yourself a wide receiver. And as you said, there's depth, so there's plenty of choice there. There's particularly one, and his surname is escaping me now. I should have written it down. His first name is Sky with 2 Ys, and I know that he really sort of molds himself upon sort of a very Edelman, very Amendola kind of sort of skill set, if you like. And yeah, he's somebody that I'm kind of looking at thinking he might be quite a good wide receiver. And I don't think he's necessarily a very early round draft pick. He hasn't been projected that high. So that's something to sort of consider. So I think I'm very much over on the side of maybe let's look at drafting. However, it is Locked On Wednesday, and we are talking about what's going on at the moment. And as you mentioned, at the moment is free agency. So in regards to what you said about Amari Cooper, now, it was said that he's likely to be released by the Cowboys. He isn't currently a free agent, and he's due something in the region of 20 million in cap, in guaranteed money. Sorry. if they cut him, the Cowboys are only on the hook for $6 million. I say only on the hook, but when you look at 20 million versus 6, you could sort of use the only on the hook. So, I mean, they're projected at the moment at something along the lines of 20 odd million over the cap. So they've just franchise tagged their tight end. So, you know, another sort of surprise of a lot of money being dropped on a tight end. So, Amari Cooper, at the moment, we don't necessarily know if he's an availability, and then kind of what it means is don't know if there's anything in place in regards to if he's not cut, then is he just literally not available, or is he somebody that they're looking to move around? So the thing is, with Amari Cooper, I mean, I know a lot of people have him highly rated, but I know a few people have him kind of good, not elite now, particularly now. And in all fairness, not to shamelessly plug myself, but Mike Giardi yesterday on a Clare Perspective, which dropped this morning, he actually mentioned how Amari Cooper is a good wide receiver, but he's not an elite wide receiver. And the one thing that I want to add to that is, but he's getting elite wide receiver money at the moment. And that's something that, do the Patriots want to look at? They haven't got the money for the elite wide receiver. They just haven't got those numbers this year. Or a lot of people say, oh, you can move the cap around, this, that, and the other. But also, do they want to? They've got a lot of holes to plug. They spent a lot last year. Do they really want to do a significant amount of shuffling to buy out that elite wide receivers kind of stock money that's going at the moment? So as much as I kind of look at Amari Cooper as in, that's great because that's a wicked jersey for me, on a much more realistic sort of note, I just don't really know if it's something that the Patriots want to go down in that direction. Because again, how long term are we looking with a guy like that? Is he an individual that's sort of slightly on the decline or anything? I don't have his age in front of me, unfortunately. I should have Googled that at the same time. I have all the other ones, but so I'm not really sure how old he is. But I know that he's been kind of in the league for a while. So not saying age should matter and that, you know, that's it, we're done with them. But it's definitely a position that youth is going to help to win out, because it's a speed position. So you're always going to sort of look more to a younger guy who's got sort of more energy, more speed. However, Tom Brady really just throws that to the wolves, doesn't he, in all fairness, with his whole... So
yeah, he does.
What am I? Yeah, this is it. I had a look at the free agency wide receiver, because you also mentioned Robbie Anderson from the Panthers. But again, he's not a guy who's at free agency at the moment. So I looked at the top free agents, because we know that they're available. We know that that is just a monetary thing. It's not sort of a negotiation that is needed to be put into place like possibly Robbie Anderson would be. I know Amari Cooper, if he's cut, then again, that just goes to the same as a free agency situation. It's just you're picking the guy up on a contract, and that's fair enough. But looking away from those sorts of chaps, I looked at the list of wide receivers that are hitting free agency, and as much as we want these wide receiver ones, they come with such a hefty price tag. It's difficult to look at the names that they've got going at sort of at the top end at the moment and think that it's really feasible for the Patriots. I mean, you've got DJ Chark of the Jags. Now, he may go for slightly less money than he'd really want to. I suppose everybody would really, but in that, I mean, he's going to have maybe reduced his price tag because he's coming off a fractured ankle injury. So he only played up to week 3. I think he got injured in week 4 last season. So you're looking at a chap who hasn't really played for a while, coming back off injury, maybe wasn't in the best sort of team to showcase him either. So is he going to be out there on a price tag that's lower than he's worth? Possibly, but there's no guarantee. You've got Juju Smith-Schuster, again, 25 Steelers, coming off a shoulder injury and reduced production. So is he... I know that Patriots fans will probably be like, okay, if you can just give me Juju Smith-Schuster, then I'll just have him, regardless of if he's on the decline and stuff like that. And I appreciate why you would say that. But he's not going to be a guy that's just going to come over here on a reduced price tag. I mean... It's been said, I know that there's been rumors and whispers and all this kind of thing about how the Patriots are still operating as if they had Tom Brady. So it's all of a, you can kind of, so they sort of exceed their self-worth, in all fairness. And As a Patriots fan, I'm obviously going to be of the mindset of, well, in all fairness, they may not have Tom Brady, but they've still got Bill Belichick. And yeah, they've got a depleted offensive coaching staff, but it's something that's in the building, the building stages. And you've got a rookie quarterback who got plugged in his first year and outshined all the quarterbacks that were taken before him. Yeah, he isn't the epitome of the best quarterback in the league. Of course not. But he's a rookie with 1 year on his belt and really performed really well.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to have, then it's not going to have the same pull as Tom Brady, obviously. But I can appreciate why they'd still have this attitude of, well, we are the Patriots, because they still are, especially under Bill Belichick. Now, I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that, and I can completely understand why. You're looking at a rookie quarterback, and you're looking at a depleted coaching staff, completely. But I still kind of see under the whole Bill Belichick, and he still sort of demands respect within the industry and stuff like that. So I think they can still kind of have that little bit of, we're great attitude in a way sort of thing. So I'd still see that free agents would kind of want to come to New England. It's just definitely going to be less so now, because individuals like that have said that they kind of want to play under Tom Brady, and you can appreciate why. So yeah, I can understand in regards to why those comments are going out there. But going back to the list, going back to the list, you've got Christian Kirk of the Cardinals. Now he's versatile slot, and out wide, he's had a steady improvement, which ultimately means he's a hot commodity, which again would mean a high price tag. So again, you're looking at sort of, is he somebody that's going to be out of the Patriots price range completely? Michael Gallup of the Cowboys. Now, he didn't get franchise tagged because they tagged the tight end, as we said, but he's talented. But he's unable to stay on the field, and this is one that I'm sort of curious as if he's going to stick around with the Cowboys. I genuinely think that he will. I think that they will work something out to maintain him.
Right.
But I mean, particularly as they've gone on record saying that they're looking to drop Amari Cooper, I can't imagine that they would sort of continue to try and build themselves up, releasing another wide receiver sort of thing. So. I think that's something that's going to be worked out, but what do I know? Odell Beckham Jr. Now, I know a lot of people kind of we're talking about him. He's another kind of big name. He's been out there for a few years, so he's got the credibility. He's got these stats. He's got kind of the reputation, if you like, a little bit like Juju Smith-Schuster. He's got that reputation that it's a name that you throw out there, and you don't even really have to have watched many games to recognize the name. You may not have seen much of him play, but you hear that name and you're like, well, I know that guy's good because I've heard his name so much, sort of thing. And Odell Beckham Jr. is one of those. Personally, I think from what we saw last season that came out when he went to the Rams and how much he seemed to enjoy being with the Rams. I mean, obviously, they won the Super Bowl, so you're going to. But he seemed to, it came out that he really seemed to fit, and he really seemed to kind of be happy. And I think that although being 29 and stuff like that, I would imagine that he's going to go on some kind of, if the Rams need him to, my opinion is he'll go on some kind of Rams friendly deal, because he just seems to enjoy it with the team too much. I don't really see him being pried away unless somebody wants to drop ridiculous money on him, which obviously the Patriots wouldn't. I say obviously, they're going to now, aren't they? Just because I've said the word obviously, just to make me look terrible. Obviously they won't, so they will. But no, seriously, I couldn't imagine the Patriots dropping a considerable amount of capital on a 29-year-old, who's been in the league for a while, this and that, and had some kind of adversity behind him as well. So I personally think, looking at that name, I would not be surprised if it comes out that they worked out some deal only on a year, but he's going to be back with the Rams. I don't see him on the list of just sort of like potentials even. So moving down, there's not many left, don't worry. Moving down, there was a couple that got franchise tagged that would have been on the list, such as Mike Williams and Chris Godwin, that was the other name, got franchise tagged. So obviously another set of top dollar names that you'd think would be out of the Patriots price range. So the sort of the most exclusive, the sort of that people are sort of saying that would be number one, is Allen Robinson at 28 from the Bears. Now, he needs a better offense. And I think that he's hitting free agency as possibly now the number one wide receiver prospect. Exactly. Probably the top of all the list that's left. Great simply point. Because a couple of the guys have dropped off the board because they got franchise tagged. So as much as Mike Giardi mentioned, sorry, second plug, a Clare Perspective podcast, as much as Mike Giardi said that he would love that. That's two. We're going for three. No, sorry, kidding.
Keep them coming.
But Mike Giardi knows his stuff, so I definitely want to go with his opinion because he knows his stuff.
Absolutely.
So, if Mike Giardi says it, then it's probably true. So he's sort of he would be very interested in Robinson coming to the Patriots, and I can imagine plenty of other people would. It's just one of those, you need to look at the picture from the case of he's going to demand a lot of money. He's going to warrant a lot of money, and he's going to be on the market with a lot of money being thrown at him. And unless there's something that the Patriots have got that catches his eye, for example, if if one of his lifetime goals would be to work with Bill Belichick, then you could use that. But other than that, I can't really see necessarily the Patriots have really got the money. Now, I know a lot of people will say, I think I mentioned that, the cap can be manipulated. Of course it can. But there's only so much that you can stretch and move and extend. And then it's a case of, but would they want to? Because what you've always got to look at is how much of the future you can compromise by manipulating what cap space you've got now. So it is fair enough saying, well, if you get the money freed up and you sign somebody like Allen Robinson, you've really sorted yourself out. But you could possibly have compromised the future for the next 2, 3, 4 years in extending deals with guys that you want to keep. You can only kick the can down the road so far before it bites you in the butt, in all fairness. Absolutely. So there's only so much that you can sort of think about how Bill can sort of manipulate it and work around it. So in that respect, my gut feeling is it's just this year isn't the expensive year for the Patriots. So this year isn't really an Allen Robinson kind of Juju Smith-Schuster sort of year for the Patriots. I could be highly wrong. That's fine. Wouldn't be surprised. You then kind of go into the second layer, if you like, of wide receivers that have maybe got fitness and reliability questions, such as the Will Fullers and the Jamison Crowders, that kind of thing. So, I mean, Will Fuller's serious speed, and that is definitely something that the Patriots maybe seem to be lacking. Although Kendrick Bourne, I think he's very good. So that it is a sort of a debate. And I know that Will Fuller's had his personal issues with the steroids and things like this. So it may be that you can pick him up on a reduced price. Is it really worth it? Is it really worth still dropping quite a considerable amount of cap on a wide receiver that you aren't sort of fully confident in, that kind of thing? I'm guessing that they probably wouldn't do if they weren't fully confident, but you sort of get where I'm going with the whole, he's not going to be straight off the bat 100% not a problem. He comes with a bit of baggage sort of thing, as do most, really, I suppose you could say. But when you start looking at those individuals, those sorts of names, Braxton Berrios, you start to drop down the sort of list of, should we say, desirable wide receivers. You then kind of say, well, looking at that guy, has he really got more than what we've already got, or what the Patriots have already got, sorry? How does he really compare to sort of what's in camp at the moment? And is there much point of kind of like a lateral slide? Because you're going to have to do something financially to get plenty of cap, or you're going to have to utilize somebody in a trade. Now, other than N'Keal Harry, I don't really see an individual that isn't going to create a hole by moving with him, other than possibly Nelson Aguilar, because you might be trading him for something similar. So you'd literally swap spots with him. But again, you've dropped a lot of money on him and you have only given him a year in the system. And as we mentioned on an episode recently, he drew coverage. He didn't do nothing. He didn't sit there just with money raining on him while he did nothing. He just didn't put up numbers that fans really wanted to see. Right. So he didn't give them the sparkly wide receiver one that they wanted to sort of see. And I can appreciate why we did that kind of thing. But there's always a way that a guy can perform and it's not really measurable. And I think he kind of did that last year in a way. So when you drop past the sort of the Robinsons and stuff, do you just get into the realms of the names of the guys that are just similar to what you've already got? And is there really much point putting a new guy into the system who's then got to use the first year to develop within the system? And he probably might not put up numbers like Nelson Aguilar didn't. And then really you've just kind of repeated what you've just done with Aguilar with just a new name. And although I know as fans, we get fickle and we get bored easily and we want the nice new shiny thing and this, that, and the other. Is it really worth kind of doing that on that sort of level? Like I said, if you get the top end wide receivers that are demanding sort of something like, I think Mike Williams I've got it written down, he got a 60 million 3-year deal with the Chargers, 40 million guaranteed. I mean, Robinson's probably going to go somewhere in the region of that. And I mean, some of these other guys, very similar. So it's a lot for the Patriots to put down when they need to spend money on plenty of other things. You could argue how much they want to kind of rebuild, develop without that wide receiver one. I know everybody's kind of calling for max wide receiver one, but it's a journey and they're building around Mac Jones. And if you haven't got his O-line solidified, is there much point having that wide receiver one that costs you 40 million guaranteed to run out there and max flat on his back because the O-line is so weak because you haven't put any money into it? Or, you know, you've got a wide receiver that's scoring you touchdown after touchdown, but your defense is so weak that the other team is getting touchdown after touchdown after touchdown and you still lose. I mean, it's such a large picture to look at that one single wide receiver, one piece sort of sometimes gets lost when you've got to look at so much more. And I think that's the thing with the Patriots right now is there is so much more that they need to look at, that maybe that wide receiver one isn't necessarily what they should be spending their money on this year.
Yeah, absolutely. You made such great points, so many of them, and I want to touch on a couple of them. First of all, I'm glad that you mentioned Allen Robinson because he is a player that I've sung the praises of. I've highly touted him here on Locked On Patriots for years now. He's been a trade target. Every time the trade deadline came up, it was either Stephon Diggs or Allen Robinson were the guys that I wanted here in New England because of their ability to run routes, because of their ability to be versatile, their prowess that they can show on the perimeter. Robinson is going to be among the top targets right now, and especially with guys like Godwin and Williams off the board, all of a sudden, Robinson's value is going up and up and up. The New England Patriots right now with $9.5 million in available cap space don't have the wherewithal right now to start negotiating with these players and be able to meaningfully sign them to long-term deals. Now, I understand, like you said, the cap can be manipulated. They can make moves to try to get those guys here. But at the same time, it's not as easy as people think it is. Just to clear cap space, it's not the just foregone conclusion or just, take money and put it over here. It's easy to do it. No, it's not.
Shake the cereal box out and see what comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Great analogy. I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that. But in any case, I'll give you proper credit for it, so I won't steal it, but I'll borrow it.
That's fine.
But in any case, I really think that's exactly what we're seeing here with the New England Patriots and their pursuit of a wide receiver one on the free agent market. If the Patriots are going to come away from the 2022 offseason with a wide receiver one, my opinion, Claire, it's going to be from the draft. It's not going to be from free agency. I don't think there's a guy out there that they're going to target to be able to bring that in. You mentioned Cooper earlier. Cooper had his lowest totals since 2017 in 2021. And people will tell you, oh, well, change of scenery. He's going to get a chance to play with Mac Jones. Last I checked, Amari Cooper was playing with Dak Prescott in Dallas. So Dak is not exactly a lower-level quarterback. This guy is among the elites in the league. So there's a reason why CeeDee Lamb was able to leapfrog him in terms of being the number one receiver on the. Again, I completely agree with Mike on this. Amari is a talented wide receiver. No one's questioning that. He's a solid contributor, but is he going to be that elite wideout that the Patriots really need? Is he an upgrade? Absolutely. I think you put him on this team right now, and he's among the best, if not the best that you have. But if you're going to invest that kind of money, you have to be investing that kind of money in a surefire number one. I'm not sure Amari Cooper sets that here. And the other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to touch on briefly before we get into your area of expertise, Countess, is the Robbie Anderson situation and the Nelson Aguilar situation. I wrote about this a little bit for Sports Illustrated earlier this week about it not being the like for like swap that a lot of people are thinking. It's really a case of, and I think you said this brilliantly, is it really worth jettisoning Nelson Aguilar to bring in Robbie Anderson, where there's a similar skill set, there's a similar type of, situation where they're coming off of career years, struggled a little bit this year in terms of having some upheaval with the quarterback position. I think environment was a little more due to Robbie Anderson's struggles, whereas I think Nelson Aguilar was a little bit more acclimating to his new system and getting used to a new quarterback. And there was also injury concern as well. I don't think Nelson was the same player after he suffered the concussion against the Colts in week 15, I believe, off the top of my head. I probably got that wrong, folks, but I'm thinking off the top of my head here. But bottom line, Robbie Anderson, I think, is a solid wide receiver. He knows the AFC East. I would welcome him here in New England. But at the same time, if you're essentially swapping Nelson Aguilar for Robbie Anderson, how much are you really gaining as opposed to how much you're losing? So if the Patriots are going to go wide receiver, if they're going to go pass catcher, I think they're going to go to the draft. And if they do go to the draft, folks, wide receiver may not be the only area in which they target. A position that continues to be talked about, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago here on the pod, is the tight end position. And the Patriots may have their sharp eye on some draft targets this year. Who catches the Patriots' sharp eye when it comes to tight endage in the upcoming NFL draft? And who stood out to the Patriots scouts at the combine? Our Empress of tight endage will enlighten all of us when this episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast continues. But first, folks, football on the field may be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops, and there's still some equivalent of football hot stove going on. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next free agent's going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball, folks. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC, you name it. BetOnline.net's got it covered. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Patriots fans, thank you once again for making Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage and your first listen every day. I am honored, as I am every Wednesday, to be joined by the Countess of Clare herself, the Empress of tight endage, the Queen of TE, the Baroness of blockers, the Principal of positivity, the illustrious ClazzyClare Cooper joins me here today, as she does each and every Wednesday. And Claire, because you are the lady of Locked On, I know that you had your sharp eye on the tight end position. You always do. We joke about it, but you are an expert in the field of tight endage. And one of the things that I've been dying to talk about with you, and we started this discussion a little bit a couple of weeks ago, is the Patriots' potential to address the tight end position in the draft. And I know this is not something that a lot of people are talking about. You look at the roster up and down, you see Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, numbers 1 and 2 on the depth chart. They're not going anywhere. They're going to remain there for at least 2022 without any question. Devin Asiasi, Dalton Keene, they're your number 2. They're, your second tier now, and each of these guys is expected to compete for a roster spot. But Claire, you and I both know that the New England Patriots are always all about the team. They want to improve. They want to make sure that they're doing the right thing, crossing all their T's, dotting all their I's. Word has it that down in Indianapolis at the Combine last week, that the Patriots had their sharp eye, the scouts at least, on some of the tight endage that was going on in Indianapolis. And Claire, I've got to give you credit. Folks, it's one thing to be at the Combine in Indianapolis, scouting these guys, watching them up close. It's another thing to be watching the coverage on the NFL Network, but for Claire to brave the time difference and put in the work that she puts in to scout tight endage for all of us here in Patriots Nation, that deserves some well-deserved kudos. So All hail, Countess, for doing that. We appreciate you, and we definitely are ready to absorb your wisdom and counsel. But that being said, not only have the Patriots scouts had their sharp eyes open, you have as well. And who caught your sharp eye at the combine? Enlighten us on some of the tight endage that Patriots fans should keep their eyes on as the NFL draft approaches in just under 2 months.
Well, I'm here as a service, obviously, to you guys. That's what I'm here to do, to provide a service. I mean, the tight end class is another deep class in the draft, but I think the need for tight end around the league, with a few top names hitting free agency, shows that there's definitely a market for tight ends this year. Mm-hmm. The Patriots may look at maybe the lower round because they have significant need kind of elsewhere. I mean, the amazingly talented and very lovely Mark Schofield did help reassure me on Tuesday on One Patriots Place that it's not beyond the realm of possibility that the Patriots take a low round pick on the tight end. Now, to be fair, Mark was one, maybe saying that to make me feel better, and two, of course, just speculating in his opinion, and it's probably unlikely, but not crazy for the Patriots to look at a lower level guy. Now, by looking at a lower level guy, or a later round, should we say, it means that the Patriots aren't really going to be looking at taking the kind of Trey McBride of Colorado State or Greg Dulcich of UCLA. I mean, the ones that were there that are significantly top round sort of tight end projected. One of the ones that I really enjoyed watching was Daniel Ballinger of San Diego State. Mm-hmm. He's a great Y tight end, a really good blocker. And that might possibly be why I took a bit of a shine to him. I kind of naturally gravitate towards those kind of tight ends. But he performed really well across all the tests and all the drills. And so I think his draft stock will kind of be affected by that. So I think he's definitely going to be too high for the Patriots. Now, as I always mention, I don't get to see very much college football at all, unfortunately. So a lot of what I saw at the draft was the first time that I'd seen these guys. A couple of them, I'd already sort of seen their names in passing in draft guides and things. So I'd sort of seeked out their information or a little bit of tape on them, that kind of thing. So there are names that I saw at the combine that looked really good, that perhaps in the more natural environment maybe aren't quite as good as someone else. So granted, I can only give a sort of a certain perspective of opinion, but I never shy away from the fact that that's the truth. And I always kind of let you know, and I'm always very sort of open about the fact that college football isn't something that I really get to delve into. And when you look at sort of, if you search for the name of, one of these chaps on here, that kind of thing, you're only really going to get their highlights. You're not really going to get their like lowlights. So there's only so much that you can sort of go forward with an opinion of somebody if you're not sitting at his college football game each week, sort of thing. So, kind of take of it what you will. These are just names that I saw and I have sort of tried to look into and I think seemed to perform really well. Like I said, Daniel Ballinger, just out of the whole of the combine, from sort of all the tests that he did, all the kind of the ones that they actually put stats down for, like the 40 and the 3-cone drill, that kind of thing, to the actual drills that you just sort of watch their footwork and stuff. I watched every single one, made little notes on every single guy's feet or if he looked speedy, that kind of thing. So, and he was one that sort of always came out as being one of the better ones. So as much as I thought he was really good, because of that, I don't really think he's going to be there for the Patriots. I don't really think he's necessarily going to be a low round pick, especially now that a lot of the teams haven't picked up their tight ends from free agency, haven't tagged them and stuff. So there was still quite a considerable list of free agent tight ends out there with big names such as like Zach Ertz and stuff like that. So I think that scouting from the draft with tight endage is going to be maybe something that's quite popular this year if people don't look to go down and pick up maybe a bargain in free agency, if that's even possible. So unfortunately, as much as I like him, I don't really think he's going to be there. So if you're a Patriots fan and like me, you want a tight end, I think setting your sights on him might be a little bit too high in all fairness. However, he's not my draft crush. As good as he was, he still isn't my draft crush, and my draft crush, even when I can say, is still. He may still be out of reach of the Patriots. And this is something that really quite depresses me to watch the draft, in all fairness, is that my draft crush is going to go somewhere else again. I should have learned last year with Patrick Freiermuth, and I knew the Patriots weren't going to draft a tight end because they just picked up Hunter Henry and John Smith. But this guy was so good. It was like, how can you pass upon him? But obviously they did. And they did get some very good guys, so that's fair enough. But he went over to the Steelers, and he's actually doing pretty darn good. Yeah, I had a lovely message the other week from somebody. I won't name and shame. So, but I appreciate the message of. They said to me, "I've got to give you credit. You were bang on when it came to Pat Freiermuth. He's been really great." And I was like, I want to say I told you so, but I just don't want to be that person. So you wouldn't do the told you so dance, really, but no, in all fairness. So. Yeah, I should have learned from that, but I didn't. So I have a draft crush again this year. And it's, as I mentioned, it's Austin Allen of Nebraska. Mm-hmm. Now, I talked about him last time. We sort of mentioned him. I watched him at the combine, and it just enamored me to this kid more. Now, unfortunately, Nebraska didn't have such a great performance in offense, and that didn't show him in the best light. Now, that might work in our favor in regards to the Patriots, and it might kind of reduce his draft stock. Unfortunately for him, but great for me. Might reduce his draft stock, and the Patriots may be able to pick him up, but it's starting to look maybe unlikely unless they go sort of. Yeah, I still think it's really unlikely. He's a tall guy. He's just now he recorded at just under 6'8". He was 6'7", and I should have this in front of me. 6'7" and 5'8", apparently. Mm-hmm. However, if you've read things online, I've read that he was 6'9". So I think it's always difficult to get an exact, but going on the combine figures, which you would think would be, is probably the figures that they use when they kind of go into the NFL. He's just under 6'8". So he's got really good size. Now, the concern with someone who's really tall is the fact that they might not be very good at blocking because they go too high. Right. And I watched the blocking drill at the combine, which I found just awesome. I'm sorry to really geek out on you people now, but the blocking drill was brilliant because it was so transparent in showing these guys' skills. Now, obviously, you could be having just a bad day, you could have nerves, this kind of thing. So it's not cut and dry. I appreciate that. It's just one small segment of information to show. But it really highlighted the way that the equipment works, really highlights if you hit too high, it's very obvious because the sled doesn't move. So it was very enjoyable to watch that, to really see the blocking capabilities. And for a tall guy, he didn't do too badly. He did quite well. So again, that will work against me in the fact that it'll put him in a higher position possibly for drafting. So it's really difficult to give you a full picture with only so much information as to kind of where they're going to go in the draft. It's kind of ifs and buts and candy nuts and speculation, in all fairness. But he ran a really great 3-cone drill. He actually did. He was the top for the tall guy. It was impressive that he did a 6-second 3-cone drill. So, but I understand that there was an issue with that they were running the 3-cone drills after everybody had kind of done everything else at the draft. So you were hitting them on something that was really kind of athletic ability after they'd had a really long day. So I think the results of the 3-cone drill won't be taken sort of as much into consideration perhaps this year maybe as they have been. So but it still shows that maybe he's got a bit of endurance because he ran a really good time after he'd done everything. So you can sort of look at it from different perspectives and different opinions completely. So I'm not going to be able to go away from the fact that he is my draft crush. And I know that I'll get flack from people for having a Titan draft crush again. And why didn't you learn at Pat Freiermuth? I know. Why didn't I learn? Because he was so good. That's why I didn't learn. He was so good. And this kid looks really good too. So please, all of you, I know that obviously you want the Patriots to get the best players possible when it comes to the draft, but I would very much appreciate you all keeping your fingers crossed that a lower round draft pick of Austin Allen goes to the Patriots. So yes, yeah, please.
From your lips to God's ears, Claire. And I think that's a lot of ways. We talked about Allen a couple of weeks ago here. You actually, you really kind of, gave me the opportunity to take a deeper look into him, because he was someone that I had always eyed on the periphery, especially with Nebraska. He wasn't getting an awful lot of the high level press that some of the other tight ends in this class were getting, but he deserves it for his size, his ability to block, his ability to be able to, get open. I think that there is a lot of potential there. And if the Patriots are serious about keeping this area of their offense being a focal point of their offense for many years to come, they have to continuously look at ways to upgrade and ways to be able to keep that position fresh. And Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith are not signed for extremely long-term deals. It's looking like Henry will be here for quite a while. Smith, I think, has to show the Patriots a little something this year in order for them to consider maybe extending him out before they say, okay, well, we signed you to this deal, Jonnu. This was, it's been real, but we're going to move on when the contract is over. If he can show them that, then I think the Patriots are very well set for a number of years to come. But if they're looking for a potential number two, if he's going to walk after his contract is up, then they really have to get serious about maybe looking for something. And this draft does have some hidden gems at the tight end position, and you turned us on to a few of those. Little surprised that the name Connor Hayward hasn't come up. I know that as a tight end, he's got versatility. Michigan State kid.
He was quite small. He was a little bit on the
only
short
6
side.
feet. Only 6 feet.
They're actually talking down as 5'11". 5'11 and 1/8. Yeah, so Connor Hayward, he was 5'11 and 1/8. I've got that he's great after the catch. He's very versatile. He ran a 4.72. Let me just see if I've got any other good notes on him. Just bear with me one moment, because you've thrown me for a loop there. The one guy that I was really interested in was Jeremy Rooker, and he didn't perform really at the combine. So I was a little bit disappointed because I didn't really get to see much. So I watched a bit of tape on him. So I was really interested in him. I'd be interested on what Rooker does in his pro day, because that's probably going to up his draft stock. In all fairness,
absolutely. So it's a great point.
Yeah. I'm just trying to look at what number Hayward was, because I've got numbers. I have got so many notes. You will not believe.
Hayward's versatility is really what kind of gave me the option to take a deeper look at him. And you mentioned this. This is a kid that returned kicks and punts early in his career, transitioned from the running back position actually to come in and to play the tight end. A lot of people are talking about him as like that tight end hybrid fullback type role. The Patriots love these guys. You know they love Swiss Army knife type of guys.
This is the thing, though. He did a great push on the block when he did his blocking drill performance was really good. So that's interesting. You make a note of that. See, the thing is, they brought Dalton Keene in for that, though, didn't they? Or what? Or we assume we've come to the opinion of that they brought Dalton Keene in for that kind of H-back role. Now, I was very much in the let's clean out the cupboard of the tight endage that isn't obviously Smith and Hunter. And he would slot into the role that maybe we thought Dalton Keene might end up being. Then yes, I was looking for more a rounded tight end. I was looking for that's why I was very enamored with the tall guy, because the thing with Gronk is he is really athletic, but he's so much above all the other players. And it just gives the guy an edge when he's a tight end, and when he's like in the end zone and things like this, it just gives him that edge, having that height without being kind of stretched more like a basketball player. You want the height, but you need the broadness as well, sort of thing. So I think that's kind of why Hayward didn't catch my eye as much, because of him being a smaller guy. And I'm not heightist, just for anybody I'm not hating on smaller guys, don't have an issue, but he just didn't quite kind of catch my eye in the same way. But yes, I've got notes on him. Really good. Really good performance, actually. So if they were to take him, I don't think I'd be too upset. I'd feel that it was the Dalton Keene replacement and hope that he didn't go down the same road, and hope that we saw something more of him. The one thing in regards to drafting a tight end this year, even if it's a lower round, is something that I mentioned when we talked about the wide receivers at the beginning, is having a guy who is developing with Mac Jones for the future. Because at the moment, with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, yes, they're on several year deals, so they'll have that time with Mac. And Hunter seems to have really sort of made a connection with Mac Jones, so you don't really need that sort of progression. It's already sort of there in a way. But it's always good to have this kind of player or these kind of players around him to grow, to develop. So, like you said, you've got Hunter Henry and Smith for 3-4 years. You've only got, I think, am I correct in saying 2 more years out of Asiasi and Keane on their kind of draft rookie contract? So they're only cheap, in inverted commas, for 2 more years. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, you are right in saying that, yeah.
So technically, because they didn't really work with Mac last year, because of Asiasi being a healthy scratch, that kind of thing, and Dalton Keane being on IR because of his knee surgery back in August, they haven't had much time to really integrate with Mac Jones. Now, obviously, practice and stuff like that I appreciate, but they've only got two more years with him technically. So you sort of then they're not long term. So if you were to pick up somebody in the draft now, you've got 4 years. So Mac's already had 1 year of development. It seems quite not a bad idea to bring a guy in whilst Mac's had that little bit of time to settle in, and now he's developing, now he's growing that franchise. You plug in a tight end who isn't utilised initially excessively because they've got Hunter Henry, they've got Jonnu Smith, but slowly over the time towards the end of their contracts develops and works his way in. You could be picking the next the tight end one of 2024, 25, that kind of thing. So because there's such depth at the tight end class this year, I think this is why, even though I know that a lot of people are saying that they've got a lot of other holes to plug, that kind of thing, sometimes you've got to take advantage of what is there in front of you. You can't miss out too many opportunities. And Coach Bill, he's not stupid, so he's going to be well aware of this sort of thing. So I think this is why sort of my mindset is of plugging for the maybe a lower round tight end who will grow within the system with Mac Jones. And then in a couple of years, we could really see something phenomenal from the kind of Mac Jones tight end one relationship. So I think that's some of the reason behind my sort of wanting, cheering on for this. It isn't just that, yes, I'm a tight end enthusiast and I appreciate that, but that isn't the be all and end all of what I think. And I do look at the team as a whole. I am a full Patriots fan, and I do just think of sort of investing into the future of the Patriots, into the future of Mac Jones. Whilst there's such depth at positions, it's difficult to completely pass it by just because you've got those 2 top tight ends from free agency that they picked up last year.
Absolutely. Claire, once again, you put on a masterclass of tight endage every single time you're on the show, but not just about tight endage, really. I mean, the wealth of knowledge that you've brought, you've definitely lived up to the Wednesday wealth of knowledge when it comes to wide receivers, when it comes to tight endage. And really, I think you've given me a little bit of information and a little bit of an education on someone like a Connor Hayward. And who knows, if the Patriots are serious about trying to develop Dalton Keane, then they don't really have a place on this team for a guy like Connor Hayward. But you look at the versatility, and I always look at these Swiss Army knife guys because it's just Bill's MO. He loves versatile guys that can do it all. And with the special teams background, he's going to be somewhere in that draft room lurking around. That name's going to be there. Whether or not they choose to go with him is another thing, but he'll definitely be someone that Bill has his sharp eye on. And again, Claire, if Bill is doing his due diligence, he's listening to this podcast today. He wants to know what the Empress of tight endage is saying about the tight ends on this board. That I can guarantee, my friend. Thank you so much for taking time out to join me here today on the pod. Folks, she is ClazzyClare Cooper, a phenomenal columnist for Pat's Propaganda. She's got a new article out on Pat's Propaganda. I encourage you to check it out. The new podcast, The Clare Perspective, a Patriots podcast. Her guest, Mike Giardi. This is a must listen for any Patriots fan. I encourage you all to check it out. Anything that she puts out there, whether it's voice to microphone, whether it's pen to paper, absorb it and enjoy it, because you will be a better football fan. You'll be a smarter football fan, and you'll be entertained at the same time. What more can you ask for? Claire, before I let you go today, please let all of our listeners know where they can reach you, where they can interact with you, and what you have coming out until our next conversation here next Wednesday on Locked On Patriots.
Well, obviously, I haven't plugged myself enough, have I? It would seem. But no, in all seriousness, if you want to hit me up on Twitter, it's at ClazzyClare, which is ClazzyClare. As you aforementioned, my recent article came out for Pat's Propaganda this morning. It was franchise tagging a tight ended report by ClazzyClare. So that's up there now on patspropaganda.com. As always, fullpresscoverage.com carries my podcast, A Clare Perspective, which went out, I think it went out this morning as well. And that was the episode I recorded yesterday with the lovely, the dashing Mike Giordi of NFL Network. And as always, One Patriots Place is there for you each and every week with Steve Balistreri, Thomas Murphy, and myself. And Tuesday's episode is now live on YouTube and all the places you get your podcast with the lovely Mark Schofield.
Absolutely. And anytime you can end a plug with Mark Schofield, of course, the host emeritus here on Locked On Patriots,
totally.
You cannot ask for better. So on that note, folks, thank you for continuing to make Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage. Once again, I'm Mike Debate on behalf of my good friend Clare, ClazzyClare Cooper. Thank you for tuning in today and for staying locked into Locked On Patriots. Until next time, folks, stay safe, stay well, be the change that you wish to see in the world. Have a great day, everyone.